Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, episode 113.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of Haven, Cartographers, and Trapwords. We have a 6-pack review of Fantastic Factories, which we're putting on tap, and we're profiling our first hop varietal, Cascade hops. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile. No day, all is for the best in the best of our world.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
With a cascading chain of effects.
Well,
you know, engine building.
Yeah.
And cascade hops.
I get it.
I told you I'd come up with something.
You did come up with something.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Draft Mechanic. If this is your first episode, thank you for joining us. And if you are a returning listener, of course, we love you as well. You can find us on the internet, draftmechanic.net or boardgames.beer, an actual website that just got renewed that I pay for. You can also find us on social media at Draft Mechanic, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the regs, all the regular places, the usual places you use.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. There will be a thread up for this episode, as there is for every episode. So if you are listening and you have something to add to the conversation, that is a place to do it. If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we also do twice monthly meetups. One on the first Thursday of every month at Good Road Cider Works. That will be on November 7th, this coming Thursday. And then we also do one on the third Tuesday of every month at Salud Cerveceria, which will be on November 19th this month.
And I remember to put up the event for Good Road in time to this week.
Yay!
Yay! Thanks, me. Oh, I should also mention, we don't mention this often enough, but Draft Mechanic is a member of Punchboard Media, where we all bring something to the table. Please go check out all the other great, awesome content creators, video, audio, written, and carrier pigeon at punchboardmedia.com if you would like to. We do not actually have any carrier pigeons.
You don't know that.
I don't know that, but I'm just going to take a pretty regular assumption on that one. Danielle, I believe that you have a news that you would like to share. We're going to actually, Danielle's got some exciting beer news. Well, some news.
It's not exciting beer news. It's bad beer news. But
Danielle
it
has
is
news.
beer news. And I'm going to step a little bit outside of our comfort zone. We usually only talk about craft beer here, but sometimes we take a moment to poo-poo decisions made by larger beer companies.
The macros.
In this case, it is MolsonCoors, which has essentially been synonymous with Denver for its entire, I think, 150-year history or something like that. Well, in the last couple of weeks, they announced that they are moving their headquarters from Denver to Chicago. And the reason that they cited for this
Was the good pizza.
No, it was to hire and retain better marketing talent for their new products.
Oh, seriously? That's what they said?
That is what they told the Denver
that is
newspaper.
rough. Hey, Denver, we've run through all of the possible marketing in your city. We're going to go to Chicago.
Oh, yeah, and I guess they were having trouble getting people to move to Denver for marketing. But the idea that they are moving their entire headquarters out of the place that their company is essentially like tied to in everybody's mind so that they can find more people to market their new products because people aren't drinking their beer anymore is both ridiculous and telling and horrifying, because I don't want to know what they're trying to market to us now and what they're going to try to, what market they're going to try to sneak into. But
they're going to replace the Rockies with just like traffic. Lots of traffic.
Well, we'll have to see how good their marketing becomes because they are making quite a sacrifice to go there, I would imagine, in the loyalty or in the minds of their loyal customers.
Yeah,
I'm assuming they have.
That is crazy. I had not heard that was the reason, just that they were doing the moving. So that is...
No, so they can hire marketing people.
Gotta get them marketing. Gotta get that SEO, that search engine optimization. Well, I've heard that that's a thing.
I can imagine that removing large numbers of fairly decently paying jobs from a market isn't going to do great for their marketing in Denver.
No. Not that, probably people in Denver drink a lot of MolsonCoors products. I mean, I imagine they do. Lot. Yeah, but, I have no other words to say about this. That is Funny and sad, but mostly sad.
Mostly the sad one, yes.
Well, hey, I'm sure all of the craft brewers are going to suddenly have a lot of very good qualified people ready to hire.
Perhaps.
If they are hiring. Yeah. In the other news section that we usually do at this part, Danielle, do you have a number of Kickstarter project updates to go over?
That number is 5, and yes, I do. The Search for Planet X from Foxtrot Games completed their campaign with $48,181 of their $13,000 goal with 1,177 backers. Late pledges are available on their Kickstarter page if you still want to get this one.
And you should.
Yeah, if you want to know more about that, we did a Kickstarter preview in...
It's been a few episodes.
I think 2 episodes ago. So you can go back and listen to that, and unsurprisingly, we loved it. It's a really good deduction game. Cosmic Colonies from Floodgate Games completed their campaign with $29,288 of their $15,000 goal with 730 backers. They also have late pledges available for this. Calico from Flatout Games is funding at $153,000 of their $8,000 goal with 5,077 backers. This one is ending on Thursday, November 7th, the night of the Draft Mechanic Good Road game night. Remember both of those things for November 7th, and it just crossed their 11th stretch goal to add scenarios and achievements.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Twain from J. Lee is funding at $7,709 of their $5,000 goal with 184 backers. This is also ending on Thursday, November 7th. And Fossilis from Kids Table Board Games is funding at $107,970 of their $13,678 goal with 2,842 backers. This is also ending on Thursday, November 7th. The latest stretch goal they've added is a 5th player and a solo mode. So if you are interested in that or you have more than 4 children, good news. You can still get in on it, and they have a 5th player and a solo mode.
And before we get too far away from it, I do want to mention we played The Search for Planet X twice at Mega MooseCon last weekend, which is honestly really rare for us, playing a game that is a preview copy of something for a Kickstarter, have it coming out twice. And we actually, had a number of people that were just like, holy crap, this is really awesome. Just kind of walking by and taking a look at it. We also had a chance to play with some friends. And really, if you like deduction games, we're still playing this game well after we did our Kickstarter preview of it. It's going to be on my top 10 next year, 2020, which is way too far for me to say anything, but it's really good.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't say that.
It's really good. Go check the late pledges. Yeah.
November 7th. No, that one's done. Never mind. Not Thursday, November 7th on that one. Why don't you tell us about some other things that may or may not be ending on Thursday, November 7th, Jake?
None of these are actually ending on Thursday, November 7th. In fact, some of them are not even started yet. I actually only have 2 Kickstarter projects this episode, and only one of them is an actual game, and only one of them is currently live. So bear with me over these next few minutes as I tell you about some things. First up, from our friends over at Double Feature, Classy Dice Buddies number 2. This is the second pin set in the RPG-inspired class pin from Double Feature, who did our Draft Mechanic pin and also does the Tiny Dice Buddies line that I'm super obsessed with. Funding is few $100 over their goal right now, and this one is ending on Sunday, November 10th. There is an estimated delivery of the end of the year for this one, and she's running a really quick Kickstarter campaign on this one. It just went up a few days ago. It's going to be like a 10 or 14 day campaign total. Basically $10 to get a pin, and then price breaks as you get more and more. Like I have 4 pins for $34 or something. This is, like I said, the second batch of these RPG class pins in the Tiny Dice Buddies lines. So far you can get the Rogue and the Sorcerer ones, and coming up are the Warlock, Cleric, Monk, and Barbarian. Yes.
These look like they're straying a little bit farther from that really strict Tiny Dice Buddies style as well. They've got a little bit more like fun animation style settings in them. So I think even if you've looked at the Tiny Dice Buddies stuff before and you're like, that may or may not be for me, take a look at these ones because they are a little bit different in style, and I think they are really cute.
Mm-hmm. I'm super excited primarily about the Rogue because I play a Rogue in our D&D campaign.
Yes,
and
you do.
It is just kind of like a scene of 3 D6s with like knives and daggers and stuff. They're kind of like running through a corridor, and it's really funny, and I love it. So yeah, check out the Classy Dice Buddies. We'll link it in the show notes like we do, because that's what we do here at Draft Mechanic, or rather that's what Danielle does when she does the show notes.
Yes.
The other one that I'm going to talk about is a game that is launching this Tuesday, November 5th, that we have been waiting with anticipation for. It is called Honey Buzz, and it is coming from Elf Creek Games. This one, like I said, launches on Tuesday. It will be ending on November 27th with an estimated delivery of July of next year. This is going to have 2 different pledge levels. You have a base pledge. It'll be about $39, and the deluxe edition will be, I think, somewhere around $60-ish. The deluxe is going to have a whole ton of awesome component upgrades, including acrylic, kind of like Azul-like tiles for the nectar that you're collecting throughout the game, and also some upgraded wooden components and some other cool stuff like that. We talked about this back in episode 107. It is kind of a combination of an economic game and also a tile-laying action decision placement game where you are going to be drafting these kind of double hex tiles, and you're going to be laying them in your own personal hive. You're making your own little beehive in your personal area, and then as you complete rings of 6 hexagons, you're going to then activate all of the different action tiles that are in that ring to go out and search for nectar and bring it back to your hive, put it into the holes of your hexes weave hive thingy, and also go and sell your honey and trade your honey and do all the other kind of economic resource management things you can do. The art for this is so freaking awesome as well. We had seen just basically paper and pencil versions of the art, but the full colored stuff has been coming up on Elf Creek Games' website over the last few days, and like it's looking so good. Anne Heidsick is doing the art for this one, and it is gorgeous. And Danielle, you had a chance to play this one as well at Gen Con.
Yeah, I played it with you.
Yes.
You were there at the same time.
I'm behind the scenes just trying to throw the segment over to you.
I loved this game as well. It was a really interesting and fun game. I'm curious to see how it looks with all that new art. I have not had a chance to go look at that. Or I guess it's not up yet, so I wouldn't have seen it. But I am excited to see this. This is one of the rare times where you're like, hey, something's coming to Kickstarter, and I don't immediately go,
No, but I will see all of you on the internet on this Tuesday, November 5th, when Honey Buzz launches. You got to check this game out. It's a lot of fun. You can go back and listen to episode 107, our Gen Con recap.
I was going to say, warning, it is a Gen Con episode, so it is a little wacky.
If you want to hear us talk about it, we talked about it for a good 10-15 minutes because we had such an awesome time playing this. But that is Honey Buzz, and that is the Kickstarters that I have for you this episode. Kind of a light episode. You can only look at so many Kickstarter preview videos before you start to gloss over.
Yeah.
Anyway, should we go take a break, maybe? Maybe we'll talk about some games we played.
We should do that,
Let's do that thing.
Want to wear your Draft Mechanic pride to your local brewery, board game meetup, or board game meetup at a brewery? Check out redbubble.com/people/draftmechanic for t-shirts.
One of the great things about a local game convention like Mega MooseCon that we went to last weekend is you just have a whole bunch of time to play games, which sounds really stupid when I say it, but I think is kind of important, especially for us kind of in the review world. You know, we might have a night here and there to play a game, but when it really is just like, hey, we're just going to play board games for the entire weekend, you get to kind of just go through and just be like, we haven't really talked about this. Let's play this and, say some things about it. And I feel like this is kind of one of those episodes where we got to play a lot of stuff that we haven't really had at the top of the pile, but it's kind of been in the corner there. We're just like, I should probably get that. We should probably get that going and play that. And I feel like this is one of those right here.
Yes, we are going to be talking about Haven, which is a 2018 release from Red Raven Games, which plays 2 to 2 players in 30 to 45 minutes. The designer is Alf Siegert, and the artist is Ryan Lockett. It is a 2-player area control game with layers upon layers of area control.
Several layers, in fact.
Nice.
I think maybe 3 or even 4. I didn't really think out how many there are. But basically, you and your opponent are playing opposite sides of a forest, and one of you plays the forest forces trying to stop the evil city player from encroaching onto the, sacred lands that this is. And then the other player plays the city to, do that encroaching. But on your turn, you're basically going to be doing a number of steps that involve you playing cards into one of 3 kind of tug-of-war battle piles that are to the side of the board. Each one of them corresponds to a different standee that is on the board. You have a water elemental and a leaf elemental and a
rock elemental.
Rock elemental. There we go. 3 elementals. Those are the ones that are mattering. And you're going to be playing cards generally face down that have 2 different kinds of stats on them. They either have power and they have weapons. The powers kind of relate to the mystical side of things. They relate to the lore and the magic and stuff. And then weapons relate to the weaponry side of things. Once you get to a certain point and a number of cards have been played on one of those elementals, you're going to do a comparison to see who has more of both things. Whoever has more weapons on that particular space is going to gain control of the space on the board where that standee is, which is good about area control that I'll talk about later. Whoever has the higher power, the lore power, in their side of things will gain the actual lore token there, which is another layer of area control, because you have the highest amount of that particular kind of lore token. You will get a endgame scoring card, which is good. After you resolve a particular elemental and that space is occupied by one of the players, you're going to move the elemental to another space, and over the course of the game, you're going to obviously, start collecting a bunch of those spaces. Each of the spaces kind of are connected by a bunch of paths in between them that section off the main board into a bunch of different areas. If you control a majority of the temples around one of those areas, which are the havens, you will then gain control of that haven and feel very good and get a whole bunch of points later in the game.
And put your little wooden token on it.
Yes. And the game will continue until you've run out of pretty much havens to kind of control. And then you're going to add up a bunch of scores for your lore tokens that you have, for the havens you control, for the temples that you control, so on and so forth. All of these different levels of layers of control. There's also some other stuff, like you'll have some cards that have special one-time use powers, and there's a resolution mechanic for how each of the different elementals will resolve, but we'll talk about that as we go on. But, Danielle, you have played this once, and you have played the forest side of things, correct?
I have. This is true. You've played it more than once.
Yes,
though.
I played both sides, and I will say, oh boy, I got my butt whooped both of the times.
Oh, I thought maybe the city was just really hard.
No, maybe I'm just really bad at area control. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So the cards that you get here are going to obviously have different numbers of power and also different numbers of weapons. And I guess I just have this continual problem where I think, oh, I totally have enough to win this thing. I'll totally sneak in here and have 2, 3, 4 weapons here. And then Danielle got all of the different lore tiles, and I had literally 0 lore tiles in the game that we played.
I wasn't going to mention that, but you brought it up.
Oh, no. Let the roasting begin. It's interesting because, like, we always talk about games that you lose but feel good and still enjoy the playing of, and I still enjoy the playing of this game no matter how badly I do. It's got a lot of interesting kind of interlocking mechanisms there with the way that you're playing your cards and trying to decide what you want to win and what you're willing to give up, which I guess is kind of the core of any good area control game.
Yeah, I really like that there was a lot of different choices that you're making at any moment during this game. You have 3 different decks of cards on each side of the board. You have I forget what they're called, but the people that you are sending in to fight for your side, and those are the cards that have a lore number and a weapon number on them. And like you said, you're generally playing them face down, but that's only if you're playing them from your hand that you're playing them face down. One of the things that you can do is just flip up the top card and play it onto one of the lore tokens, in which case everybody knows what it is, and if you've just absolutely screwed yourself for the hand, you have to not make a face so that the other person doesn't immediately know that they are going to win that token, and maybe they'll do the same. There are also these offering cards that you are playing, and they're what are actually going to cause scoring on each of those lore tokens. When a lore token has 3 offering tokens, or offering cards rather, on it, it will score on the next scoring phase. And a lot of times you really want something to score, but you don't have enough offering cards to make it happen, or the other person is just not interested in helping you make that happen. But every turn, you have to end by playing an offering card. It's a thing that has to be done every turn, so you're advancing at least one of those tokens every time. And based on the different offering cards you have, you may, instead of wanting to take those guardians or whatever they're called cards into your hand so that you have more people to place out, you may just be drawing a bunch of offering cards so you can get the one that you need to make the lore token that you absolutely need to score. And you also get those lore cards that you had mentioned, which are the ones that give you the special powers. And is it worth it to not have the offering you want or the fighter that you need in order to take one of those special powers, knowing that some of the special powers are very targeted to specific things, and maybe you don't want to draw 2 of your guardian cards and play them out now, which is one of the power things. You're like, I don't want to add to any of my things, I just want to score them. So you don't really need that lore, but there are some really good stuff in there, so maybe you want to take just one, and maybe it'll be useful. It really is an interesting balancing act, and I like that.
Something I found really interesting about the way the map board area control works is that there are a number of the havens that have an even number of shrines around them, and you don't win control of a haven until you have a majority of the is it shrines or temples, whichever one it is, of the points of control around it.
Shrines.
So if you have 2 out of the 4 points and the other one doesn't get claimed, you don't get control over that. It's not just, whoever has majority at the end. It's you have to have the majority, period. it's possible for a lot of those to tie up and have, just a 2-2 split, which is something I don't usually expect for an area control game. Usually you think an area control game is going to resolve something someone will have control of this area. And I kind of liked having that. It made those extra points of control even more important, especially because all of the sections kind of butt up against each other. So one particular shrine or whatever could be important for 3 of the different sections of havens on the board. And I just really liked having that kind of decision of which one am I willing to give up, which one am I willing to concede, and if I concede this, can I then make sure that I'm in a position to get the 3 out of 4 on the other ones? Because if not, this is just going to be points that nobody gets.
Well, yeah, and I think the fact that those guardians are moved around by the player who doesn't win the shrine, I think really helps, because at that point you can be like, okay, I did not get this point of control on the board. Where do I want to put this so it's not in a place that you can take control of the haven? I want to put it as far away from something you're controlling as possible. Maybe stick it into one that I've already gotten 3 out of the 4, and I just need to finish that final one. So that helps me because it's going to close it out and I'll gain that, and it's far away from where you're going to gain control. So the fact that you get to play something, but then the other person gets to move to what we're going to vie for next is really interesting.
While you're on the topic of things that the losing player gets to do at one of those particular card stacks on the side there, since I am very well familiar with losing all of the card stack points, if you fail to win either of the 2 points of contention, either the lore points or the weapons points, you get to leave one of your cards there at that particular that elemental battle, which is kind of an interesting kind of consolation prize. So if I had maybe one of my 4 and 2 weapon people at one of the particular lore tokens there, I do have the opportunity to leave that person in play, which is actually really helpful and can at least help a little bit in turning the tide on the next time that one gets scored, especially if I then move the elemental statue to somewhere particular that I really need to win.
Or if you can't place it in a spot that you absolutely need to win at that very moment, if you're not set up to take control of something, you could leave one of your garbage cards there so it's not coming up in your hand, because you will cycle through your deck a couple of times during this game. So if I leave, the 0 lore or 1 lore 0 weapon card or whatever, it's not going to come up into my hand when I draw stuff up later, and I know that my deck is a little bit better at the moment.
I picked this game back up at the Geekway to the West math trade back in the spring, and I guess it's not too terribly of a surprise that it's taken this long for us to get it to the table. Area control is not really super big for either of us, and I think 2-player area control is kind of a space that, is not something we're super into. Like, when we think of a 2-player game, we're always thinking of things like Lost Cities or Schottentotten or Targi or even Imhotep the Duel. And area control, at least, this many layers of area control, just didn't hook me as much as I wanted it to. Like, I have fun with it. I think it's a beautiful game. Obviously, the art is amazing, and I feel like the mechanics work really well. But if you're not a super big area control nut, I don't think you're going to get as much out of this game as you would of other 2-player games.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was a fun game to play. Like, I enjoyed myself while I was doing it, but I can't see myself really bringing this to the table that frequently, and I don't really know why, other than the fact that area control isn't really my thing. But I do really like that vying for the lore power and the weapon power on the 3 different elemental stacks. I like the hidden information versus the visible information. I like balancing putting cards to try and win the lore token versus putting offerings out there to try and make sure that I get the points before you're able to get it.
Yeah.
All those things are fun for me when I do them, but it just, it didn't grab me. It was a fine game, and I really liked a lot of what it did, but it's not the kind of game that I'm going to absolutely recommend to somebody who's like, what's the best 2-player game you've played in the last 6 months?
Yeah. It's got a lot of good ideas in it, and I'm glad that we had a chance to play it, but I have a feeling this one's probably going to make its way back out the door again for us pretty soon.
If you are looking at getting into many layers of area control, if you've got, somebody who is not looking for a dudes on the map style area control so much as, a card play area control game, this is fun, but Battle Line is also fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is Haven. Up next, we're talking about Cartographers. This is a 2019 release from Thunderworks Games. This plays from 1 to 100 players, depending on how many pieces of paper you have, and in about 30 to 45 minutes. It is designed by Jordi Adon, with art by Luis Francisco and Lucas Ribeiro. This is a card-based map-making rando writer with plenty of polyominoes to play with.
So Cartographers is a game that takes place over 4 seasons, and at the beginning of the game, you are going to set out 4 different goal cards. Each season, you're going to score a combination of 2 goal cards. Spring being the first season, you're going to score goals A and B. Summer is the second season, obviously you're going to score B and C. Fall, C and D, and then winter, D and A. So you're going to know at the beginning of the game the things that you're going to get points for throughout the entire game. Each of the seasons has a time threshold which indicates when the season is going to be over, and each of the cards that you're going to flip out to fill in your rando writer board shows how much time they take. Generally, cards that give you more variety and options are going to take more time. Each of the cards that you're going to be flipping out during the season to fill your board is going to have types of terrain, 1 or 2, and shapes of polyominoes, also 1 or 2. What you're going to do once the card is flipped out is you're going to draw one of the 2 shapes that's on the card, or the only shape that's on the card if there's only one, in the terrain or one of the 2 terrains that is shown on it. It's not that difficult. So if there's water and farm, and there is a T-shape and the long Tetris 4-piece that everybody is waiting for when you play Tetris, you draw either a T-shape or the long Tetris 4-piece in the farm or the water. You're going to continue flipping out cards until you've reached that time threshold, at which point you're going to score. You'll score the 2 goal cards for the season. You'll add in any gold tokens that you may have accumulated up until that point in the game, including ones that you've scored in previous seasons. And you're going to get gold from 2 different ways, really. One is from filling in the 4 squares, which are orthogonally adjacent to the pre-printed mountain squares on your board, or sometimes from using the smaller, wonkier pieces on a card that has 2 different shapes on it. You'll get a gold card there as well. And those are always going to be worth a point when you do the scoring.
And they are wonky.
And then you are going to subtract points for any open spaces which are adjacent to monster terrain. Every season, you're going to add a monster terrain card to the deck which you are flipping out from. If it comes up, you will remove it from the deck, and then you're going to pass your board in the direction that is indicated on the card, and the person in that direction is going to draw the shape somewhere on your board that is empty, knowing that you're going to lose points for every empty space which is adjacent to this monster terrain. So especially if it is at the end of a season, they're going to try to draw it in the most difficult to fill in around, most out in the middle of nowhere space that is going to absolutely screw up your scoring possible. Once you have totaled both of your goal cards and your money and subtracted your monster points, that is your score for the season. You move on to the next season. You will start flipping out cards again, filling in your board some more, trying to get to that next set of goals. Once you've finished all 4 seasons, you're going to add up all your scores from the 4 seasons, and that will give you your score from the game. And whoever's the highest score wins. Imagine that.
Imagine that. The highest score. Monster points.
Negative points.
Negative monster points. Cartographers hits on a lot of things that I enjoy in games. I get to draw on a piece of paper. I get to play with polyominoes, which is really cool. And it does something super awesome that I don't think enough rando writers do. It allows your neighbor to do something to your sheet. And I think that has got to be the coolest thing about Cartographers, putting it kind of above a lot of other rando writers. That mechanic where you pass your sheet to the left and they have to draw the monsters in on your sheet is something that I don't really think I've seen in any other rando writers just far. Can you think of anything that has that kind of interaction in it?
No, I can't off the top of my head. And it is definitely something that pivots your game quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because if you're losing, you could be losing up to like 8 or 9 points if a monster shape has been put into a terrible spot for you. And if you're losing that many points, like the last game that we played, my first season, I had -2 points.
Wow.
Because I was dumb and started working on the D goal in the first season when it's not going to be scored until the 3rd season. It helped later in the game.
Oh, yeah.
But I didn't score very well on the A and B goals, and then we got that monster card on the next to last card of the season, so I only had 1 shape to put next to it. And I think you were drawing on my board at that point, and you put the monster shape in a spot that was absolutely not where I wanted it to be, which is your job.
Yeah.
That's the point of the monsters, is to screw with somebody else's game. And I think it's kind of interesting because then later in the 3rd and 4th season, there were definitely cards that came up, and I was looking at them going, I can score points with this if I put it here, but I also could instead place it next to the monster things, and I won't score points for it, but I'll keep myself from having negative points, and maybe later in the game I'll be able to work towards that goal with a different thing, but I'll already have the monster shape sort of closed in, because the shape works really good here, and I can really block off that shape. Because sometimes if you put a monster shape in really well, it's going to create a single space, and there is a card that lets you fill in a single space, but they are more difficult than some of the other shapes to fill in, or it'll leave like a 2 space, which is the worst, because I don't think there's anything that is 2 squares right next to each other and only 2 squares right next to each other.
One of the wonky shapes on one card that like never comes up. You're more likely to get a single square than you are to get 2 squares.
Certainly, because you can fill in a single square if you actually can't place the shape, which later in the game you might. It is interesting to try and mitigate those negative points, especially when you are looking at the different goals. And I think how you do that is going to be based on the goals that come out and where they are, because some of the goals are just worth more points than others, realistically. Like, you get larger chunks of scoring, so if you can bump yourself up to that next scoring threshold, it's like, oh, okay, it's definitely worth it to me to gain these 3 points, even if I'm going to lose 1 or 2 points, because 3 is more than 2. Math.
I've heard of it. I also really enjoy the way that the gold cards are set up. So each of the different gold cards comes from its own stack. So you have one goal that is always going to be related to cities, one goal that's always going to be related to the shape and size of your map cartographing, and so on and so forth. So I really like the fact that you won't get stuck with like, well, we have 3 different forest goals this time around. I think it's a really smart design decision as well. I'm hoping that in the future, if they put out some additional content for that, we get more of those. I feel like that would be the easiest thing in the world to do, is just put out a promo pack of new shapes and new goal cards. So hopefully we see some stuff like that coming down the future. Or just additional map sheets would be fun. Just, the B side there has that kind of cavern in the very middle of the board. And I'd really like to see some non-rectangular shapes. What might be kind of interesting as well to see how that plays in.
What do you mean?
Well, just like if it wasn't a totally square zone that you started with, maybe you got like an L-shaped map that you're filling in a particular expansion. It would just be interesting to see how that would work. I'd like to find a way to fit polyominoes into more weird shapes.
You definitely have to create new goal cards to go with that as well, though, because some of the goal cards have to do with touching the left and bottom edge, or something like that, where if you change the shape of it, it's obviously not going to score the same way.
Yeah, this is a really, really smart random writer, and probably the best one that I've played this year. I really love throwing a whole bunch of new ideas into a random writer, and I think that polyomino placement is the best that it's been done in one of these particular styles of games, because Patchwork Doodle existed, remember?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I definitely played that. I do want to touch on 2 things that are a little bit of rough points for me. One, while I do feel like I am creating a map in this game, that doesn't make any sense. That's not how you make maps. You don't make the map and then build the city based on that. You build the stuff and then you map it.
Yeah.
This also doesn't feel anything like the role player universe to me. Like, this is a role player game because they say so, but no, it's not.
It's got that good old IP. Hey, how about this? I'm going to find a way to invalidate your first complaint.
Okay.
Role player is a game about creating a character for an RPG, right? This is a game about creating the fantasy world in which you play your RPG. Yeah.
I guess, but that's not what they say.
That's what I'm saying.
They say you're like the
Hire
Queen's
me,
cartographer.
Hire me. I can come up with rationalizations.
Please don't hire him.
Don't hire me, but I'll do some freelance.
Anyway. So I don't really feel like the theme of role player comes through into this game.
Yeah, it really is just, we want to put our IP on this, and I can't really blame them for it.
Map making, really. But the other thing is that this game, and it's a weird complaint because the game works fine the way they did it. When you draw a different type of terrain, all the different types of terrain have different symbols that you draw into the little square. So if you're drawing river, you make like a squiggle. It looks like you're pretending to write stuff on a piece of paper where you're not actually writing words. Or if you're doing a farm, you make diagonal lines. If you're doing a forest, there are little 3 circles with sticks coming out the bottom, which are trees, obviously. If it's a city, you draw a house. And that's easy enough to tell, but once your board gets kind of full, it is a little bit difficult to look at. And everybody we have played this game with has said, this would be better with like crayons or colored pencils, which is 100% true. I don't know if that's a complaint or just a suggestion.
I think it's like kind of the way you bling up your games.
I
Like,
wish
that's
this
exactly what I
had
do.
colored pencils in it,
Well, yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely.
but you'd have to include
a lot.
a lot of colored pencils, because if you just have one, then there'd be a ton of downtime while everybody draws it. So I think they did the right thing, but at the same time, like, if you buy this game, also get some crayons.
I might be doing that in the near future, because I have a feeling I'm going to be playing this game a lot. I really enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun, and that infinite scalability makes it perfect for kind of beginning or middle or honestly any time during the game night. Especially once players know it, you can easily knock this out in under 30. This fits like the definition of a sessionable game for me that we talked about a few episodes ago, because I feel like when we played with 4 earlier today, we were done in 26, 27 minutes.
Were we?
Yeah, and that was after the teach. So I have a feeling if the 4 of us played again, we could easily knock this out in 25 to 30. And that's just perfect. That's perfect sessionable game. So sessionable, random writer, these are the words that I've coined. I don't know. I have enjoyed coming up with these terms. Hire me for all of your term creation.
I also enjoyed Cartographers. I think it was a lot of fun. I think it brought stuff that I hadn't seen in other games, and it sort of gave me a new thing to do with Tetrominoes other than fill in a quilt. Even though it is kind of filling in like Patchwork was, you are filling in something. Having those different types of terrain and those goals that you're working towards made it feel completely different, and I like it.
Oh, and there is a mini expansion we haven't played with yet. I didn't tell you about this.
Oh?
It allows you to spend your coins for special skills.
What?
Yeah. So, coming soon to a future episode of Draft Mechanic, we
feel like
talk
you've
about a
lied to
game
me.
again. I didn't lie to you. I just omitted.
That's a precedent I don't like.
I've omitted coin spending. Yeah, I didn't
That's
tell
a
you.
precedent I do like.
All right. Well, that's Cartographers. I would not be surprised if we talk about it again more in the future. Moving right along, Danielle, will you handle the words that are about to happen?
I mean, I will screw them up just differently than you would. Next up, we got to play Trapwords, which is a 2018 game from Czech Games Edition. It plays 2 teams of 2+ players, so 2, 4, 6. I mean, I guess you could play with odd-numbered teams.
Nope, not allowed. It's totally allowed.
You do need at least 4 people for this game, though. You cannot play it with less than that. And it plays in 30 to 45 minutes. The designers are Jan Brezina, Martin Hrabalik, and Mikhail Pozarek. The artists are David Jablanovsky, Philip Murmak, Regis Torres, and Michaela Zaoralova? Zaoralova. Let's go with that. This is a team versus team, don't say the word game, except you don't know what the words are that you can't say.
Trapwords is a game that has a theme.
What?
Yep, you're, I guess, working through a dungeon or something. But
You are.
The theme exists as, just a dressing for what is actually a really smart word game. Everybody's played, I would assume most everybody has played the game of Taboo, where you have a keyword that you're trying to get your team to guess, but you have a sheet of words in front of you that you're not allowed to say. Maybe if the word that you're trying to get them to guess is ostrich, you're not allowed to say bird or big or round
Or mean.
Mean. Like those are the words you can't say. Now, imagine if you knew the word you had to describe to your teammate, except you didn't know what the trap words were. Because that's literally the conceit of this game. At the beginning of each turn of the game, your team is going to get a word, and you're going to see it, and you're going to write on your own personal sheet several trap words that the other team is not going to be allowed to say. You're both going to do this depending on what room of the dungeon, thematic dungeon you are in. You're going to have more trap words to do. You can obviously customize this to have how many rooms you want, blah, blah, blah. You pass the book to the other team. One player gets to see that little book with the word revealed, but they don't know what the danger words are. So they have 2 minutes or so to try to suss out that word. So if I'm saying ostrich, maybe I would say like emu, but burger at the Fuddruckers place, but you can't say proper nouns, so I can't say Fuddruckers. They have ostrich burgers at Fuddruckers.
I know. I used to eat them a bunch.
But, something like that you try to find a way to finagle that word in so that Danielle would say ostrich, and then you'd feel very good about yourself. And if you did actually do that, you would move forward in the dungeon, you get through 5 rooms of the dungeon, and you did the good thing, and you beat the boss of the dungeon. Some of the rooms along the way have curses. Like there was one where he's like, "I'll eat my hat if it isn't blank."
Yeah, I had to say that every time I guessed. It was
kind of
weird.
stupid human tricks kind of things. And then the bosses have different skills or combination or powers or things you have to do. Like the one we had is you can only make a total of 3 guesses instead of 5. I did get it on the very first guess, though, so I feel very good about that. You did a very good job describing that clue.
Thanks. And I have a feeling that power would have been more useful if we had had a bigger team, because then everybody would have sort of gotten fewer guesses as a total group.
Yeah, so that's it. That's really the entire conceit of the game. Like I said, you can customize it with the number of rooms and how many trap words you have per room, but it's going to be team versus team, word guessing, but you don't know the words, and then whoever gets to the end first wins. I gotta say, I did not expect this game to work. It's a game that I've kind of avoided because I'm just like, I don't need another CGE word game. But we saw it with Letter Jam a few episodes ago, and we saw it with this one. They're really just continually hitting with success in this particular space. Obviously, Codenames being the first big smash hit that they had of that team versus team word game. Letter Jam we talked about a few episodes ago is super awesome. And Trapwords, dang, that was a lot of fun.
It was, but I am sort of biased. Taboo is a thing that one of my friends and I growing up used to do for hours on end.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a game at that point. It was just us sitting there with a deck of Taboo cards, just going through them, one card after another card after another card. Because it's just a fun thing to do. Just try to come up with weird ways to say stuff. And at first, when Bert had told us about this game, I was like, I don't know, that sounds just like Taboo. Why do I need this? What is different about this? But there are two things that I think about this game do improve on it. Obviously, the fact that you don't know what you're going to try to say means that you have to be more creative about what you're saying. You really need to look at the other team and be like, what did they think I was going to say when I saw this? How can I work around it? What precedent have I set by the other rooms that we've been in? Like, if I always say a creature instead of an animal, they may have written creature at this point because they know I'm not going to say animal. So you need to be aware of what precedent you've set and also of what they think you're going to say. The other thing that made this really difficult, and I didn't expect it to be difficult, was the fact that you can't say proper nouns.
Yeah.
Any proper nouns at all.
Like, you saw how hard it was for me to say ostrich without saying Fuddruckers.
Yes, I did see that.
Very difficult.
But you can't say things like the names of countries. You can't say like anybody's name at all, and it becomes very difficult when you're trying to sort of pinpoint something down. You can't say the names of any kind of properties. So like if you're trying to say sword, you can't say like in Star Wars this was made of energy or something like that. It is interesting, and it's something that I don't recall seeing in any other sort of word guessing game like this.
One thing I will say, we played this 2 versus 2. It was us and also a friend of the show, Bert, and his son, Alec, also a friend of the show, but literal friend of the show. And I really, honestly, I don't think I want to play this other than 2 teams of 2. I feel like once you get to the point where you have multiple people guessing at the same time, you're going to have a lot more complication and a lot more frustration because the players are not allowed to discuss what they are thinking as the game goes on. You say a word, that is your guess. If you say any other words, that is your guess. So they're not allowed to communicate as part of a team. I mean, that might be fun, and maybe, once you get to the point where you're really, really feeling good about the game, you will get to the point where you have that kind of team think with your team. But I honestly do not want to do that for a while because that sounds like it would be incredibly frustrating.
I think you could do it. I think it would be fun and I could do it. You just need to make sure everybody is aware that you don't just blurt something out. You think about it and you listen to the words that are happening in your clue. One thing I do have to say about this game is that if you have a larger vocabulary, you will be better at this game.
Very true.
There are some word games where having a big vocabulary isn't necessarily going to win you the game. This is not one of those. Because if you know that the word lupine is a way to get around wolf and the other team doesn't, you're going to have an easier time because they'll have written wolf and you cannot say it. If you don't have a huge vocabulary or English is not your first language, this is going to be a very different game and much more difficult.
Yeah.
So, I feel like everybody needs to make sure that the teams are on even footing when you make teams. You can't just sit down and be like, oh, this is how we're splitting up.
The Dictionary Club is one team. Everybody else is another team. No, that would not work out well.
Or parents versus kids. That would be super unfair.
Don't do that. Don't do that ever.
No.
I gotta say, I really appreciate the meta of this game. Even after one play, I could see us, as we're thinking up words to write down on the trap words, you're thinking, Well, they obviously think we're going to go with blank, so we don't even need to put that one down because they're not even going to guess that because it's too dangerous. And then getting the clues over to me again, I'm looking at them just like, all right, so it's got ostrich on here. Do you think they put bird? Maybe that was too obvious. Maybe I can say bird. And then you say bird, and it's bzzz.
Why would you say bird?
Why would you say bird? Just go to Fuddruckers.
Can't.
I think that was the first time anybody said the sentence, go to Fuddruckers, in a year or two, or a bunch of years. When's the last time you saw Fuddruckers? Are there any Fuddruckers left in Charlotte?
I mean, I saw one somewhere, like, recently.
Yeah, this is not relevant. Hey, if you have Fuddruckers in your town and you go there, please let us know in the Guild 2470. Otherwise, you can obviously talk to us about Trapwords or a bunch of other games. And I enjoy Trapwords a lot. I kind of want to play this again. I kind of want to get this game for the game night bag, because I feel like it's a really good end of night or beginning of night kind of game for any of our game nights. What do you think?
I think it is good in that it is good with a lower player count. Like I said, you can't play it with less than 4, but it works really nicely at 4.
Mm-hmm.
Although, having Letter Jam already, I'm not sure I need another word game which works with a small player count.
I mean, it's really competitive versus cooperative there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're correct.
Would you rather play Trapwords or Codenames? Because they kind of fill the same space.
No, they don't.
Well, I mean, team versus team space is what I'm saying. Team versus team word game.
I would probably rather play Codenames because it is sort of a different kind of animal. Like, Trapwords is very akin to Taboo. It is a more interesting gamerly version of Taboo.
Yeah.
I think Codenames does something that I'm a little bit more interested in, even having been a big Taboo junkie.
Yeah.
I'm glad that Bert has this, and I will play it anytime he brings it out, but I don't think that we need to buy this. Okay. If you have a bunch of word games already, think about whether this fills a space that you already have a game for or not.
I think the thing that I would place this, I would rather play this at game nights instead of Codenames, because it has a timer on it, and Codenames, well, allegedly has a timer, but like everything in Trapwords is time, and I feel like it's a much more fast-paced game. Codenames can definitely drag for a long time, I guess, unless you use a timer. And then you just kind of have one-word clues, and you feel bummed.
Yeah, but Codenames makes me feel more clever than this does.
Oh, okay.
Like, this is just, how can I talk around something? I don't feel really smart when I do that. I just feel like I was able to make circuitous language happen. That's not a great, like, that doesn't speak highly of my intelligence. That just means that I was able to come up with some garbage.
Can you tell which of us was the communications major in college? It was me.
It was you.
Give me all them words. Give me all your words. All right.
So
well,
I would rather play Codenames. This was fun. If you get a chance to play it, I would say give it a try.
Cool. Well, that is Trapwords. All right. After this break, it's time for us to move on to our main feature where we assemble some factories and decide whether or not they are fantastic. It's Fantastic Factories, if you hadn't guessed. I was just trying to talk around what we are going for there. Some amazing machinery. Yeah? You've given me, you can't give me the stink eye on an audio medium.
I can.
She does. All right, time for the time for the ad. After the fall of Rome, Europe entered into the Dark Ages, but with the rise of feudalism, prosperity returned to the area. In After the Empire, you are a medieval ruler trying to grow and defend your fiefdom.
Players will gather resources, build buildings, enlist troops, and recruit skilled refugees to both increase the value of their city and fortify its defenses against impending invaders.
Having a more valuable fiefdom yields greater rewards, but also brings more invaders looking to get their cut of what's yours. If they manage to sack, you will lose gold, your buildings will be damaged, and your refugees may be injured.
Whoever's city is most prosperous at the end of the game is the winner of After the Empire. After the Empire is available for pre-order now from Grey Fox Games.
Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. So, way back in episode 77, in the Kickstarter section, I talked about a game called Fantastic Factories. It was coming from a new designer, from a new publisher, and here we are, 1.5 years later, ready to review the game called Fantastic Factories. This one is a 2019 release from MetaFactory Games that just got picked up by Deepwater Games for wider distribution. It plays 1 to 5 players in approximately 30 minutes. It is designed by Joseph Z. Chen and Justin Faulkner, with art by Joseph Z. Chen as well. This is a game of tableau building, dice allocation, running that combination engine. Oh yes, cascading effects.
Mm-hmm. In Fantastic Factories, each player is trying to build a factory and produce goods, and your score at the end of the game is going to be the total of the goods that you've produced, plus any points that are on the sort of annexes that you are adding to your factory, the blueprints that you're adding to the factory throughout the game.
We will call them fantastic points.
Some of them are not worth anything, the blueprints that you're adding. Some of them are worth quite a few points, but all of them are going to help you build your engine and your tableau. On a turn of Fantastic Factories, there are two phases. There is the market phase, where you are either going to take one of the blueprint cards out of the trade row into your hand, or you are going to pay a blueprint card from your hand to the discard pile in order to use the contractor, which is of the matching symbol, on the trade row in front of you, and then it will get replaced with a new contractor. The contractor is either going to give you extra dice or maybe some extra resources, or they may give you some resources and then another player a smaller amount of resources. Either way, you're going to do one of those two things. Then everybody is going to enter the work phase. You're going to roll your 4 colored dice plus any dice that you've gotten from a contractor that you were able to hire during the market phase, and you are going to allocate them to either your headquarters board, which will allow you to gain cards and resources, or to some of the blueprints that you've already built into your factory. The way that you build blueprints into your factory is by discarding a card which has the matching symbol to the one that you are trying to build into your factory, plus any resources that are indicated on the card. There are 2 resources in this game, energy and metal. So if I'm trying to build a card that is a blue hammer symbol and costs 2 energy and 1 metal, I'm going to need to discard an additional blue hammer symbol card to place that in front of me and then play 2 energy and 1 metal out to the resource piles to be able to build it. At which point it immediately becomes active into my factory, and if there are any spots to assign dice, I can do that starting the turn that we are currently on. You are going to assign your dice either out onto your blueprint cards or to get your resources or additional cards, and then once you've done that, everybody is going to move on to the next round. The game will end the game will go into its final phase when one player has either built 10 blueprint cards into their factory or produced 12 goods, at which point there will be one additional round. You will add up all of the points from buildings in your factory and goods that you've produced, and whoever has the highest score is going to win.
Scores. Points. Fantastic points, in fact.
Sure. Points.
All right. Well, as we do with any 6-pack review, I want to start out with the basics. Let's talk about art and components. They're fine. The art's clean. I think the iconography is pretty clean. The art is very kind of whimsical, line drawing kind of things. I don't really know how to explain it better than that, yeah? What do you think?
I really like the art and components in this. The headquarters boards are dual layer, so you can assign dice into the little spots. They have iconography on them, which for the most part is fairly clear. There was one sort of discrepancy that we had between whether a question mark counted also as an X, and in the one situation it did, and I think in some situations it doesn't necessarily.
Right.
But that was the one iconography problem we had, which was easily cleared up through the rule book. Other than that, all of the blueprints have fairly unique powers, and I never had trouble figuring out what they were, because there's a limited number of things that you can do in this game. You have dice, you have metal, you have energy, you have cards. Yeah. That's really all. Oh, and goods. And that's really all you're working with. So it's not a really complicated system. I thought the art was really fun. There are robots, and all the robots look kind of goofy. There's a trash compactor which looks like a chain chomp from Mario. There's at one point where the motherlode card is literally a space rocket with a drill bit on the front of it that's going to point towards the ground. But the drill bit isn't big enough to account for the wings of the rocket, so I'm not sure how that's going to work.
Yeah, they'll figure it out on the way there.
The art is really fun, but it's also really clean. It doesn't look cartoony. It is really nice, sort of color blocky style. I like it. I think the components and the art in this game are really well done.
I want to touch another thing on the iconography, something that I picked up on that I thought was really smart. All of your resources, your energy and your metal, are circular because the tokens are circular. All of your victory points, be it points from the buildings or the goods themselves, are hexagons. And I feel like that's a really smart way to distinguish that, and I really just like that touch. The goods are just an isometric cube, and the victory points on the actual cards are also a hexagon. They're a purple hexagon. So you can always kind of point, hey, anytime you see a hexagon that's going to be points, that's a really cool thing that you're able to kind of just point out. Really smart symbology right there. Learning from the rulebook. This game was super easy to learn from the rulebook. I read the rulebook and then I went to watch it played because Rodney happened to post a watch it played video for it the day that I was trying to learn it. That was very convenient. I didn't miss anything from the rulebook. Rulebook is pretty easy to reference. It's got one of those back page complete reference guides, or at least a quick turn summary guide, and just kind of everything you need to know on the back there.
It also has a list of all the different blueprint cards and what exactly the power does, which I used for, I think, one of the cards that I had played in a recent game. I wasn't 100% sure whether it referenced itself. It was one of those things where if you build a building, you get a bonus. And I was like, well, does that mean when I build this, I get the bonus? And it said very clearly at the end of it, this does not count itself. So I thought that was really nicely done.
How did you feel about the learning curve, specifically as you're the person who did not read the rule book, but I taught it to you, the learning and the kind of understanding of the game? It's not super complex, but do you feel like you were learning more about the way the system worked as the game went on?
Not really.
Okay.
Like, I feel like this is a fairly simple game.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's pretty fair to say. The one thing that I did learn is that as I played more and more games of it, to like when I wanted to attack different kinds of cards, because cards are definitely in different sets. You have the monument cards that are really your end game scoring points. You have like the beacons that you're able to, if you make several beacons, then they stack up in points. The obelisks that you're allowed to have more of them, and they're just raw points. And that was the megalith that is basically be cheaper the more monuments you have.
But
and
you
I've
can
also
only build one of them.
Yeah, and I've also gotten to the point where I'm starting to look for specific cards in the beginning and specific cards later on. Since there are so many different cards in this game, I definitely felt myself kind of anticipating stuff to come out more as we played into the later games of the six-pack review. Do you feel that at all?
No, I mean, I definitely got a feel for when it was useful to build different stuff more as we played more games of this, but I feel like if I had stopped to think about it ahead of time, I probably should have known that ahead of time. This is not the kind of game where you need to play it 6 times to be able to understand it.
Yeah.
We've talked about some of those lately where like you play it and every time you play it, you get better at it and better at it. This is not that. I feel like you could throw any player who's played any kind of engine building game before into this and they'll be like, okay, this is what I do.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we can just kind of move on into the gameplay there. This game had a lot of kind of echoes to me of Race for the Galaxy. And I know that you hate this comparison because you love Race for the Galaxy, but I think that the key comparisons here are you're building a tableau, your victory end game and conditions are running, or somebody gets to a certain number of victory points and somebody builds a certain number of cards, both things in Race for the Galaxy.
That's not how you end Race for the Galaxy.
Well, either you run out of victory points in the shared pool, which is kind of a similar thing to somebody gets to a certain amount of victory points,
sort of.
Or somebody has
that
12 or 10.
Same, yeah.
Again, the game end conditions are the same. Obviously, there's something different about the way victory points is scored, but it's either VP is reached or cards are reached. The other thing that I found is really kind of an echo in the way that you have to discard a card out of your hand to play cards out of your hand. Obviously, there's other resources, which is something Race for the Galaxy does not particularly have. You have goods that are stacking up and you're shipping them out. But I really like that thought of I have to have extra cards in my hand to play cards. I really enjoy that mechanic a lot, which is something that in Race for the Galaxy is really the core entire economy of the game, is having a whole bunch of extra cards in your hand that you don't need so you can play that 6 power card or something like that. This game has a similar thing in that maybe if I'm collecting beacons, which I was in this very last game, they all have the same symbol on them. They're all wrench, I think. And if I have 3 beacons in my hand, I'm like, oh, I'm totally going to do this. But I've got to spend a wrench to do it. Either that means that I'm pulling a wrench out of the deck that I don't even want, but I just need it, or I'm selling or discarding one of those beacons to then build another beacon. I really, really like the way that mechanic works, and I think that that's kind of the fun core of this game. I really feel that this could be the kind of engine builder that could get people to step up into Race for the Galaxy.
See, I don't feel like it has the same... I don't feel like the way that you're discarding cards in this game is the same as Race for the Galaxy, because in Race for the Galaxy, you can take literally anything and make it money.
Yeah.
If it's a card, it's money. Mm-hmm. If you want to build it, okay, it's no longer money, but anything can be money. The problem that I kept having in this game is that the things that I wanted to build in my hand, I then could not get the matching symbol to be able to build as the discard, because you need to, if I want to build a blue hammer building, I need to have another blue hammer card. It doesn't matter what it is, but I need to have it. And one of the things that our friend Tamara had pointed out in our last play is if there was a way to discard 2 non-matching cards to make that matching card, that would have felt better. That would have felt more like Race for the Galaxy, where it's like I have to give something up, but it can be anything.
Yeah.
Whereas there were definitely turns in this game, in the plays of this game that we had, where I wanted to build this blue hammer card and it just wasn't there. And you can spend a resource, which you may or may not have, to wipe the trade row, but it just puts out 4 new cards. And we've definitely played where you wipe the trade row and the same mix of stuff comes out and there's still no blue hammer card.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there going, well, this is the thing I need to make my engine run. Guess I'm not going to play it.
No, I agree wholeheartedly, and that's probably my biggest complaint with the game as well, is that if you get into a rut and you do not have the card you need to sell or to discard to build a building, you're going to continue at it for a while. You've got to either, have the luck of the draw that the card comes out on the player before you in that market phase, or you're spending all of your dice doing research. And that's, that can be a lot of your turns. I was paying more close attention to how many rounds we had in the last few games, and most of our games seem to go somewhere between 6 and 8 rounds. So if you have an entire round where you're not doing anything, that's a big chunk of the game that you're missing out on, and it can be super, super frustrating. Mm-hmm. I would love to see, if there is an expansion for this somewhere that brings in additional or different mechanics, that they put in a rule like that, hey, you can totally spend 2 for 1 or even 3 for 1. If it has to be something that big, at least there's a way forward on that. And I'd like to have that kind of mitigation.
The other thing about that is that most of your, I think all of your blueprints that you build into your factory can only be used once per round.
Yes.
That includes the things that give you a bonus for building on a round. So if I build 3 cards in the 3rd round, but I built nothing in the 2nd round, I'm getting a different distribution of resources than if I had built one of those cards in the 2nd round and 2 of them in the 3rd round. Mm-hmm. So if you end up a turn behind, and then even if you can make up what you wanted to build on the next round, you're still at a disadvantaged position because you didn't get any of those cards that you can only use once per round for a whole round.
Yeah. And one thing, you said getting a turn behind is something we come back to again and again on this episode, is the Manhattan Project problem. I feel like this game does a very good job of that by having everything pretty much as just 1 or 2 points.
That's true.
I never felt like I was so far behind that I was out of it. In fact, in the very last game, I was really far behind. I was looking at everybody else has like 6, 7 cards, and I have 3 in front of me, but I had my 3 beacons in my hand there. I'm like, all right, well, at the very least, I'm getting 5, maybe if I'm lucky, 11 points off of these by the end of the game. I always felt like I was able to come back into it for the most part. Obviously, if you make some choices early on, or you just have a really bad draw in the beginning that starts your engine a little bit steps back, you're going to have a harder time catching up. But it was never like out of reach to me.
The one game where I felt absolutely out of reach was I tried a strategy which I knew was not going to do winningly, but I wanted to see if it did well, which was just focusing on those monument cards, so obelisks and beacons and the megalith, which are just straight up point cards. I wanted to see and make sure that you couldn't just win this game by not creating an engine, by just building a statuary. And you can't. I got like 4 points that game. No, I got a little bit more than that, but I got very few points comparatively.
You got to have an engine if
you
you
do
want
need
to
to
win the
actually
race.
build an engine in this engine building game, which is a good thing to do.
We haven't really talked a whole lot about the headquarters board yet, and I feel like this is a really interesting way that they use the dice in terms of the kind of the beginning half of the game, rather than once you've built out cards that you're placing your dice onto. I really like the way that your 1, 2, and 3 can produce energy, your 4, 5, and 6 can produce metal, but only the 1, 2, and 3 produce the number of pips of that resource. It really structures it so that you know that energy is a little cheaper than metal, and you have to really think about, how am I getting my metals to build whatever cards I've got? If I've got a card that's going to require 4 metal or something, that's either I need to have something that produces a lot of metal, or I've got to get really, really lucky with my rolls and roll some high doubles.
Or maybe I need to use a specialist that gives me some extra resources somewhere down the road.
But I really, really like the way the headquarters board works, being able to assign a maximum of 3 dice per section, and then having that doubles or triples bonus is really smart as well. If you, I can't remember if we talked about this in the discussion earlier. If you have a pair of a number in a section, you get a +1. If you have a triple of a number in a section, you get a +2.
So you get 5 at that point. Or
so,
if you're in metal, or if you have a bunch of energy, you just get all the energy, just all of it.
Yeah, like if you're really lucky and you roll 3 3s and you put them all into energy, you're getting 3
11.
energy plus 3 energy plus 3 plus 2, and that's enormous. I really like having that kind of reward for rolling doubles, and I feel like a lot of the cards as well had a lot of the super powerful cards wanted doubles as well. The one kind of card that I almost never touched in this game were the red cards that were kind of the mitigation cards. I think the fitness center allows you to lower a die by 1 pip, and then there's another one that allows you to raise a die by 1 pip, and then there's another one that allows you to re-roll. I was more likely to go after the cards like the robot that allowed me to roll an additional die, so I had 5 different options, than to go after any of these mitigation things. Did you ever use any of the mitigation cards?
I bought a couple of them my first play thinking that was going to be really useful for me, but it ended up costing a bunch of resources that it didn't end up netting me much. The times that I did use them were when I had some of those cards that gave me resources for building. They are fairly cheap cards to build.
Oh, okay.
So if I can spend 1 metal to build a fitness center or whatever the cost is and get 2 energy and a metal back, then yeah, I'm going to build that. And it's going to speed the game towards the end, which means that you don't have as long to run your engine.
Right.
So that's the only time that I really ended up using them. Or if they were literally the only things that I could draw that matched.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
So I guess the other place to really go on this discussion would be the player count and variability. Obviously, variability is going to come down to what comes up in the random draw. I feel like you can definitely get to a point where the stuff isn't coming up that you want, and that's probably the biggest frustration about having, a big old deck of cards that you're shuffling through. But I don't think we had a game where we didn't go through the entire deck at least once.
No, you're always, even in a 2-player game, you're going through at least once.
Yeah.
And there are multiples of a bunch of the cards, so if you are looking for something specific, especially in a 2-player game, since you can only build 1 of each type of building for the most part, obviously obelisks and beacons and that type of thing set aside, if you built a recycling center, I can build a recycling center too, because we're going to go through the whole deck and you're probably not going to want it. You might take it just to discard it if you need it, but probably if we're late in the game, you have stuff that you want to do more than trying to draw a card so I don't get it, because you need to be drawing stuff that matches your hand so you can play those cards out.
And then the other point, player count. I didn't really feel the game was super different at any player count. Obviously, 2, you're going to have less turnover in the trade row, but 3, 4, and 5 all kind of felt the same, and they all kind of in that same 30 to 45 minute kind of snappy time.
Yeah, I don't think this felt super different I don't think I played it with 5. I think I played it only at
2 and 4.
2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel terribly different. I probably wouldn't play this at 2 just because, well, I mean, we'll get to that in a minute. But, like, it didn't feel terribly different, no.
Okay.
For you, I'd like to know if it's the same for you as it is for me. Did making your engine work, was that the fun of the game for you? I felt like it should have been. Like, the fun of this game should be when you get a whole bunch of stuff that chains off of each other, and I do this, which lets me do this, which lets me play that, which lets me do this. That, for an engine builder, is where the fun should be. Yeah?
That's interesting, because, like, I definitely did feel that I had that fun a good bit.
Okay.
I'm guessing you didn't.
I didn't, because the game that I felt that I had everything synced up the most, where I was doing a whole lot of, I do this card to activate the second card, to activate the third card, to activate the fourth card, I actually did fairly poorly. I did better in ones where I was only using 1 or 2 cards over and over and over again. They were just really powerful cards. And that was kind of a bummer to me. Like, the fun of this game should be when I have an engine that interlocks really well and it allows me to produce a lot of stuff. But it wasn't as effective as some of the more powerful cards that may not have as much links, but it's, you roll a pair and it gives you a good and a bunch of resources. And if you've got 2 cards that work similarly to that, you're going to be producing a whole bunch of resources and goods, and it's going to allow you to play more stuff out. Whereas if you are running this complicated engine, it may produce the same amount of stuff, but you need more dice to do it.
Right.
Which means that you're investing in cards that don't give you any points but allow you the resources to get dice, or allow you the ability to get dice. And like, I had fun in that game, but then I lost by a lot. Which I don't want to make the choice between, do I have a fun game or do I score a reasonable amount of points?
I feel like the point where I got the most points out of my engine really came when I had the most diverse engine, which I feel like is something that I don't think about a lot in engine building games, because usually you want an engine building game where all 10 of your cards work together in one continuous chain. But I found I had the most success making chains of cards that were maybe like 2 or 3 cards, but I was kind of safer however my dice came out. If I had a 1 and a 6, I had 2 different chains for those to go through. If I had a pair of 4s, I had a chain for that to go through. If I had a run of 1, 2, 3, I had a chain for that to go through as well. And maybe that's just kind of the level of complexity that this game wants to be, because I definitely feel, got that 30-minute game where it's got that super ease of entry, and it's got a pretty quick and easy learning curve that you wanted to set up and teach people to make smaller engines so that they have more opportunities to run the engine every turn. Obviously, again, I feel like we're going to come back and talk about Race for the Galaxy a number of times in this. In Race for the Galaxy, when you get your engine going really good, you're bouncing all over there. You've selected just the right actions so that you've got, oh, my goods are coming in, my goods are going out. I'm going to build this research, and this research is going to produce enough cards for me to then play this 6 power card, which is perfect because it then chains into all these other cards. Well, this is more just like, all right, I rolled a 1. It's going to allow me to get a good and an energy, and then I can use that energy over here to do this one additional thing. So, smaller engines and a little bit kind of more flexible, I guess.
I think we play Race for the Galaxy differently.
You always win at Race for the Galaxy, and I always win at Fantastic Factories, so I guess that kind of says it.
I mean, I would feel better about that if you were spoiled for choice on cards in this game. If you had that ability to take any card and make it worthwhile. Mm-hmm. But in a game where you're already looking for, A, the cards which are the best cards, and B, the cards that allow you to build those cards, mm-hmm. like, sometimes you just have to take what you have to take because it's the one that matches.
Right.
And that sort of made this a little bit less fun for me.
Okay. You want to move on to final thoughts?
I mean, I've already started mine, so I might as well go into it. This game was fine. Like, I wanted to love it. I tried really hard to love it because I do like a lot of engine builder games, but it at the end of 6 plays is just fine for me. I didn't feel like it did anything that I absolutely had to have. It didn't leave me wanting to try it again, to try a different strategy to see if it was the thing that makes it work 100%. And there were more games than not that I was like, oh, well, I tried that and it did not work at all. I might be able to make it work with a different set, but I'm not really sure. It's fine, but I don't think you need this game. I certainly don't.
My final thoughts, I was intrigued by it in the very beginning because I like having any kind of engine building, tableau building game, and that 30-minute time frame is something that's really exciting. I enjoyed my time with it a lot. I like the core mechanics. I like the way that I have to kind of manipulate my cards and my dice to get exactly the results that I need. I would love to see what an expansion would do for this game, tweak a few things, take out some cards, or add in some new cards with some new exciting effects, because I feel like there's a sound framework at the bottom of it, and I want to see a little bit more construction, maybe put a few more floors onto this factory. And I am enjoying it. I definitely will keep this in the game bag because I feel like it'll be a good way to teach people how those kind of games work. So yeah, if you have thoughts on Fantastic Factories, we'd love to hear them. You can always join us in the Guild 2470, or you can jump into our Slack channel and discuss them as well. But we're going to do, as we do at this point of the episode, take a quick little break, and we're going to come back and pair some beers with Fantastic Factories.
We are.
For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. All right, as we do at this point of the show, Danielle has done the legwork, or rather the finger work on Untapped. Yeah?
No.
Danielle has done the research to give us some beers to pair with Fantastic Factories. It's a 2019 release from Meta Factory Games, coming soon also from Deepwater Games. 1 to 5 players, 30 minutes, designed by Joseph Z. Chen and Justin Faulkner, with art by Joseph Z. Chen. A game of tableau building, dice allocation, and running that combination engine. So here we go. Carbon 4 is the first brewery represented on this list in Madison, Wisconsin. They have a beer called Fantasy Factory. It's an American IPA at 6.3% ABV and 65 IBU. This is an IPA with resin and citrus aromas. It's one of their flagships. It's available in 12-ounce bottles that have a cat with a headband and a gold gun riding a unicorn with glowing red eyes that snorts fire. I did not read that sentence before I dove into it, so thank you so much for putting that there for me, Danielle.
Carbon 4 also probably has my favorite beer logo just for us as weird niche nerds, because it definitely looks like you are placing hex tiles out onto a board on their logo, because
Hooray,
they have
hexes.
little hexagons on their logo. Next up, from Springhouse Brewing Company in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, we have Robot Surf Factory, which, if you've heard of a fantastic factory, a robot surf factory would be a fantastic factory.
Sounds like a radical factory.
This is an American Pale Ale, which is 5.8% ABV. It's a pineapple pale ale with Autumn, Amarillo, and Citra hops, and it is a spring seasonal for them, which is draft only, and obviously it is not available right now because it is not spring.
This is not spring.
But it will be available in spring, and it's called Robot Surf Factory. That's pretty fantastic.
Up third, from Modus Operandi Brewing Company in Mona Vale, New South Wales, Australia, we have Future Factory Triple IPA. It is 10% ABV, which is very big, and this
Yes.
triple IPA is dry hopped with Galaxy and Citra hops. It is available in 16-ounce cans. That sounds like a fun brewery.
Yeah,
I want to go there.
they're just outside Sydney, right?
Let's go. Yeah, they're just a
We're
little
not
bit
just
to the
going to go
north.
to Australia.
Sad.
Next, from Wellbergs Brewing Company in Greeley, Colorado, we have Evil Pastry Stout Factory. This is a 6.5% ABV stout, which is brewed with lactose, peanut flour, maple syrup, and vanilla, as they say, all the pastry adjuncts. And it is available in 16-ounce cans.
You have all the fun names.
This was one of their top beers from 2018. They had their patrons vote for their top beers. This was one of them. They released it again in cans. It is a limited release, but it is still being drunk. So out there, you should be able to give it a shot if you are in the Colorado area, maybe.
Next up, Reunion Brewery in Coralville, Iowa has Juice Factory American Pale Ale. 6% ABV, 35 IBU, pale ale with citrus, especially grapefruit flavors, and a fruity yeast. This one is available year-round in 12-ounce cans.
And finally, from Foreign Objects Beer Company in New Paltz, New York, we have Pig Factory, a double IPA, which is 8.4% ABV. They describe it as a double milky fruity IPA on the can, and it is an homage to Northern California brewers. It has aromas of peach, citrus fruit, and white grape must, and a piney bitterness. It is available in 16-ounce cans.
Yes, pigs, the most milky and fruity of animals.
Yeah, you know what? Let's not go into that.
All right, well, if you would like information on any and all of those beers, you probably know by now, you can go to boardgames.beer or draftmechanic.net and click the show notes section where Danielle has meticulously arranged all of the links for your viewing pleasure
Sure
to go
did.
to brewery websites. Aren't they grand?
They're actually not that bad this week.
Oh, I guess they are grand. Good job, brewery websites. All right, Danielle, time to move on to the beer segment, and as I understand it, you have your first hop profile.
But first, a bump.
Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com.
So we are talking about Cascade hops first, and they are a really prominent U.S. hop, so I figured it was a really good place to start. Originally called USDA 56013, they were the first hop to successfully come out of the USDA hop breeding program at Oregon State University after the end of Prohibition. Now, I kind of do want you to keep into account like the time frame here. This program was started in the 30s. This hop was developed in the 50s. So that's how quick stuff comes out of the government. Anyway, it was the answer to needing a hop that was resistant to the downy mildew that was ravaging the cluster hops, which made up 90% of Oregon's hop farms. So they needed something that was going to be resistant to this. It was developed in the 50s by Dr. Stanley Nelson Brooks and Jack Horner via open pollination of a hop variety of English Fuggle and Russian Serebrianker pedigree. So those are the two that they know. They always reference it as having an unknown male hop pollination thing. So they don't actually know all of what it is, even though this is a huge number of hops that are produced every year.
We made this hop, but we don't know where or how.
Well, that's the beauty of agriculture. If you can make it once, you can just keep grafting off of it. The hops that were in the U.S. at the time were almost all bittering hops. So the fact that this is a hop that can be used as an aroma hop as well is really interesting, because at the time, all of the aroma hops were being imported from Europe. In 1967, the USDA gave the go-ahead to plant a small plot of what at the time was USDA 56013, and it became known as Cascade hops after the Cascade mountain range in the Pacific Northwest. It wasn't used a lot by U.S. brewers until the late 60s when a disease spread through the European noble hop fields, causing the prices of those aroma hops that people were bringing in from Europe to skyrocket. this hop was released to the market in 1972, and Coors, who you may remember I mentioned earlier in the episode, was one of the first adopters, since it seemed similar to Hallertau Mittelfrau hops from Europe. But the problem was that when he actually bought a ton of it and started using it, it is too oil, like it has too many essential oils, which, as you remember we talked about last episode, that is what gives a lot of the aroma and flavor when it's thrown in at the end, and it was too much. It was too strong for their beer, so he ended up not using it. However, the folks over at Anchor Brewing Company noticed this hop, and they thought it would be really good for the beer that they were brewing in celebration of Paul Revere's bicentennial of his ride, called Liberty Ale, and they used entirely Cascade hops, and it became the first post-prohibition single-hopped American ale. Nowadays, Cascade accounts for about 10% of the hops grown in the U.S. Back in 2013, the Brewers Association Hop Survey showed 5,330 acres of Cascade hops, and is currently in the top 3 hops planted by acreage in the U.S. Depending on what source you look at, it is either second or third, I think. But I couldn't get an exact count more recently than that. Everybody's just saying, well, Citra's recently overtaken it, which is true. Citra has recently overtaken it. But it is still in the top 3 hops that are grown in the U.S. by acreage. So what does it taste like? It tastes floral with citrus and grapefruit elements. It is 5 to 9% alpha acid, so it has moderate bitterness. Remember, we talked about that alpha acids are what produce the bitterness, and this is like I said, a dual purpose hop. You can use it to do the bittering in your wort, but you can also throw it in at the end for those citrusy, grapefruity, floral elements. It's often used in American pale ales and very often in West Coast IPAs, but it can also be used in things like barley wines or amber ales. 2 examples of single hop Cascade beers, as I mentioned before, Liberty Ale from Anchor Brewing Company and Mirror Pond Pale Ale from Deschutes Brewing Company, are both 100% Cascade hops. Cascade is also the only finishing hop used in a little beer you might have heard of called Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Other hops are used in the bittering, but those are not where you get the aroma and the flavor from. Those are just to create the bitterness. So what you get when you taste Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is largely Cascade. And if you go to their website, it is just an absolute, they are all about Cascade hops on that webpage. If you go to the show notes, you can take a look at it. So a lot of what you're getting from a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is going to be that true Cascade flavor.
I haven't gone back to have a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale in a few years. I got to get back on that. It's like one of those classic beers that I feel like just doesn't get the respect it used to, and should probably be more had.
Yeah, I mean, it is not a bad beer, and it has a lot of that really traditionally American Cascade flavor. So if you have any of those available to you, give it a shot and think about that is what Cascade is.
Good deal. Great place to start on this segment. I'm really excited to hear about all of the different hops in all of the world.
Cool. I have no plan on how I'm going to go through. I'm just going to kind of pick and choose what I want to talk about every episode, and Cascade was the starting point.
So you're just going to hop around?
Yes.
Yeah?
That's a good pun.
Yeah?
I like that pun.
Yes.
Thank you.
I finally nailed it. We can finally end the episode. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this here episode of Draft Mechanic. We really appreciate it. I know this one's a little shorter because I, once again, did not come up with a good final round, but sometimes that's how life happens. You can please get in touch with us on the internet at draftmechanic.net or boardgames.beer, an actual real website that you can put into your Earl bar.
I mean, remember when we used to have this episode or this podcast be an hour 30 every episode?
It's refreshing. It's sessionable, a sessionable podcast episode. Here we are.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild that is guild number 2470. You can comment on this episode there. And we have a local game night coming up on Thursday, November 7th.
Yes.
That important date that we talked about before.
Thursday.
It is going to be at Good Road Cider Works. We would love to see you there.
And finally, first of all, social media at Draft Mechanic on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I forgot to mention that earlier, but
I just assumed you had. Sorry.
It's okay. Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Gray Fox Games. Visit grayfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest. Gray Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. Ta-da!
Not quite ta-da.
Ta-da!
As always, I would like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that I'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
Ta-da!
Night.
Good night. Draft Mechanic episode 113 was recorded on Sunday, November 3rd, 2019 in front of a live studio cat. Don't forget, Thursday, November 7th, big important day.
Beauty is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Hey, this is Patrick
And this is Eric
from
Patrick and Eric in the morning. Join us every now and again for about a half an hour as we freeform chat about whatever's on our minds and how it all relates back to our favorite hobby, board gaming.
Patrick and Eric in the Morning can be found on the What Did You Play This Week podcast feed and on the Punchboard Media site.
Happy listening.
Punchboard Media, where we all bring something to the table.
Pull up a chair.
at punchboardmedia.com.